Welcome to 8 Minutes Chinese. Today, we're unlocking the essential phrases you can use in daily life and master in your next business negotiation.
So I want you to picture something for a second. 2.5 millennia ago, right?
Yeah.
Chinese generals didn't win wars by, having the sharpest swords or the thickest armor.
Right, or even the bravest soldiers, honestly.
Exactly. They won them with small, seemingly insignificant wooden sticks.
Which sounds completely ridiculous at first.
It really does. But today, those same metaphorical sticks they're the exact reason why some founders secure millions in venture capital while others they get laughed right out of the boardroom.
Yeah, and they're the reason one person just glides through a high-stakes job interview looking like an absolute genius.
While everyone else is, left sweating out in the waiting room.
We constantly see people flawlessly execute under pressure, and our default reaction is always to just call it raw, innate talent. Like, oh, they're just gifted.
Right, we want to believe they possess some magical quality that we just don't have.
Because labeling it as talent or luck is incredibly convenient. I mean, it lets the rest of us entirely off the hook.
It totally does. But in this deep dive, we're basically dismantling that convenient myth from the ground up.
Oh, absolutely. We're tearing it down.
We're pulling from this fascinating analysis of a 2,500-year-old military strategy, specifically Sun Tzu's Art of War.
That's a total classic.
Yeah, and our mission today is to decode just one brilliantly practical phrase from that ancient text, because it's a framework that explains the actual mechanics of why some people consistently win.
And more importantly, how you can apply this exact strategy to essentially engineer success in your own modern life.
So let's get into it. What is this phrase we're looking at?
Well, the phrase we're focusing on is kind of the bedrock of Sun Tzu's entire philosophy. In Mandarin, it's Du Su Xuan Sheng Xuan Buzheng.
Du Xuan Sheng Xuan Busheng. It has a really nice rhythm to it.
Because, yeah. And it basically boils down to this. Those who plan thoroughly win. Those who plan poorly do not.
Okay, on the surface, those who plan thoroughly win sounds like something you'd read on a cheesy motivational poster in a middle school guidance counselor's office.
Right, like hang in there with a picture of a cat.
Exactly. But our sources reveal that the standard English translation kind of loses the tactical brilliance of the original characters. We really need to break down the anatomy of this concept.
Because the real secret is hiding in the literal definition of those words.
So let's look at that first half to Xuan Sheng.
Yeah, so do simply means many, much, or more.
Okay.
And sheng means to win or to prevail.
Right, so we have more and win.
But the critical pivot point of the entire phrase is that middle word, xuan. Today, we mostly translate it as to plan or to calculate. So literally, more calculation wins.
Which brings us to the second half, the brutal alternative.
Xuan busheng.
Right, sheng means few or less. And busheng does not win.
So less calculation does not win.
It's a completely binary worldview. The text doesn't say less calculation makes it harder.
No, it says it simply does not win, period.
Wow. And Sun Tzu put this in the very first chapter of The Art of War, which is titled Xingji Pian.
Which means laying plans.
Right, so he establishes this completely mathematical premise before a single sword is even drawn.
And the really fascinating part here is how literal that mathematics actually was. I mean, when we hear the word calculate today, we tend to think of this abstract cognitive process.
Like someone staring at the ceiling, thinking really deeply about their strategy.
Exactly. But in 500 BCE, Suan was a highly tactile, physical action. Generals didn't just sit around and debate ideas over tea.
Right, they used these physical counting rods.
Yes, called Suan Chao.
Like actual bamboo and wooden sticks on a table.
Yep. Before a campaign, a commander would stand over this large grid and physically lay out these Suan Chao. And every single rod represented a specific tangible variable in the impending battle.
That is so cool. Like what kind of variables?
Well, they'd place a rod for the troop numbers on both sides, then a rod for the topography. Like, is it a narrow valley where cavalry is useless, or is it an open plain? They placed rods for the prevailing winds, the anticipated rainfall, the length of their own supply lines, even the psychological state of the enemy's conscripts.
Wow. So they were basically taking the infinite chaos of war and mapping it onto a physical grid.
That's exactly what they were doing.
That's essentially an ancient Excel spreadsheet. I mean, it's a proto-decision matrix.
It really is. Thousands of years before we had, like, machine learning models or predictive software, these generals were processing massive data sets with just bamboo sticks.
Because they recognized that victory didn't belong to the loudest commander or even the most passionate army.
No, it belonged to whoever processed the most data points.
That variable-based approach just completely changes how we view human achievement. Sun Tzu wasn't telling his generals to be brave.
He was telling them to do the math. The philosophy was purely mathematical. The more rods you had on your side of the table, meaning the more individual variables you had explicitly identified, stress-tested, and accounted for, the higher your mathematical probability of victory.
Which brings this ancient battlefield doctrine directly into our modern desk jobs.
Right, because most of you listening probably aren't organizing troop movements.
Let's hope not. But you are navigating incredibly complex, high-stakes environments where that concept of SWAN, scenario planning and risk mapping is really the ultimate differentiator.
Absolutely. Let's apply this to a modern arena where variables literally dictate survival. Like a startup founder pitching to a venture capital firm.
Oh, that's a perfect example. That is an environment where Du Swan, doing the most calculations, literally decides who gets a check for $5 million and who goes out of business.
Exactly. You see founders walk into those rooms all the time, relying entirely on just, well, charisma.
Oh, yeah, they use buzzwords like, we're going to disrupt the legacy space.
Yes, and they have this beautifully designed slide deck. But they haven't laid out their counting rods. They're relying on Xian Swan.
Surface level calculation.
Right. And eventually, the VC is going to ask a probing question. They might point out a potential bottleneck in the supply chain, or ask how a recent shift in consumer privacy laws impacts their customer acquisition cost.
And the charismatic founder just freezes.
Completely. They stumble, they try to invent an answer on the fly, because they only ever plan for the happy path where everyone agrees their idea is totally brilliant.
Now, contrast that with the founder who is actually Du Swan. They've spent a month stress testing every conceivable point of failure.
Right. They laid down a counting rod for what if our cloud hosting costs double next year?
They put down a rod for what if a major competitor launches a clone of our product tomorrow?
They calculated their burn rate sensitivity against a macroeconomic downturn.
So when the VC throws a curveball at that founder, it isn't actually a curveball.
No, because that founder caught that specific ball in their own head 3 weeks prior. They have the mitigation strategy ready before the investor even finishes asking the question.
I do want to push back on the psychology of this a little bit, though.
Okay, sure.
If a person is constantly mapping out every worst-case scenario, every single point of failure, every impending disaster, that sounds like a recipe for intense anxiety.
I can see why you'd think that.
Doesn't that level of exhaustive preparation kind of kill the momentum and optimism that's required to start a company in the first place? It feels like you just get trapped in analysis paralysis, staring at a table full of negative variables.
It's a fair question, but actually stress testing variables is the antidote to anxiety, not the cause of it.
Really? How so?
Well, we have to separate thoroughness from pessimism. Pessimism is looking at all the ways things could go wrong and using that as an excuse to just not leave the tent.
Right, just giving up before you start.
Exactly. But Du Swan is looking at all the ways things could go wrong and then building an operational bridge over every single one of those pitfalls before you even take your first step.
Oh, I like that. So the founder who accounts for failure isn't a pessimist. They're actually building bulletproof optimism.
Yes. The difference between true confidence and mere delusion is just the number of scenarios you've honestly stress tested.
That makes total sense. So let's scale this down from the CEO level to something nearly everyone listening has faced at some point. The job interview.
Oh yeah, the gap between Xing Swan and Du Swan is glaringly obvious from the other side of the hiring table.
Because most people think, good preparation means bringing a freshly printed resume, ironing their shirt, and maybe having a memorized STAR method response ready for when they get asked about their biggest weakness.
I'm just too much of a perfectionist.
Right, but we need to elevate that baseline. That is Xing Swan. You're preparing for the absolute surface layer of the interaction.
And if that's the extent of your preparation, you are going to completely fall apart when the hiring manager asks a highly specific, systemic question about a macroeconomic pressure facing their specific division.
Your brain will just spin out trying to synthesize an intelligent response in real time. It's impossible.
Deep prep, laying down those modern counting rods, means your preparation has very little to do with your own resume.
So what does it look like?
Du Swan means you listen to the company's last 3 quarterly earnings calls. You mapped the interviewer's entire career trajectory on LinkedIn to understand their specific biases and values.
Wow, okay.
If you're interviewing for a supply chain role, you've already pulled data on the Southeast Asian shipping bottlenecks the company mentioned in Q3, and you walk into the room with a framework to solve it.
Notice the mechanical shift in that approach, though. You aren't preparing to talk about yourself. You're anticipating the entire architecture of the company's pain points before you even shake hands.
Exactly. You are building a swan show matrix of their problem.
And this is a big, you can't map those variables if you're blind to the environment or lying to yourself about your own skills.
Right.
Like a crucial point.
You can't lay down the rods if you don't even know what's in the room. And Sun Tzu actually addresses this directly.
Yeah.
He provides the mandatory prerequisite to planning in another really famous phrase from that exact same chapter.
Which is?
ZDG. It translates to know yourself, know your opponent.
So the word Z implies this kind of deep, ruthless knowing. Jing is yourself, and B is the other party or the opposing force.
Right. Before you can ever hope to engage in Duchuan, you must execute Z. You have to conduct an absolutely unflinching audit of your own capabilities and limitations.
And you have to deeply understand the landscape you're walking into.
Yes, because if you overestimate your own resources, your counting rods will just represent a fantasy. And if you underestimate the market's resistance, well, your math will be entirely wrong.
That prerequisite audit applies so brilliantly to a space that modern culture assumes is driven entirely by, spontaneous talent and luck.
Oh, you mean the creator economy?
Yes. We look at YouTubers or digital creators with tens of millions of subscribers, and the prevailing narrative is always that they just, turned on a camera, acted naturally, and the algorithm magically blessed them.
Yeah, but the reality behind the camera is an absolute masterclass in Swan.
It really is.
The creators who build lasting empires, they do not rely on luck. They map the algorithm with military precision.
They know the exact minute their specific demographic is most active.
They study the psychological triggers that compel a viewer to click and, more importantly, retain their attention.
The A/B testing they do on thumbnails is such a perfect example of this. Every thumbnail variation is a modern swan show.
Yes.
They isolate a single variable, like the saturation of a color, the size of a font, the expression on a face, and they put that metaphorical rod on the table to mathematically guarantee the highest possible click-through rate.
They're engineering virality before they ever even hit publish.
And the irony is that the people who engage in this exhaustive, rigorous preparation behind the scenes, they're always the ones who look the most relaxed in public.
It's so true.
It's like an iPhone. On the outside, it's just this single piece of smooth glass. It feels perfectly intuitive, simple, and effortless to use.
But beneath that glass, there are billions of microscopic transistors firing simultaneously to create that illusion of simplicity.
Exactly. The performance that feels the most natural to the audience actually requires the most robotic, grueling calculation underneath.
Because when a person has fought the battle in their mind 100 times, when they've mapped the job interviewer's core anxieties, or when they've tested a video's pacing down to the millisecond, of course they appear relaxed.
Right.
The actual performance is just the execution of a simulation they've already run and mastered.
They already read the script that everyone else in the room is trying to write live on stage. So how do we actually bring this philosophy into our everyday routines? Because our sources highlight some highly practical Mandarin phrases that act as perfect mental triggers for this concept.
Yeah, the vocabulary itself is a fantastic tool for self-reflection.
Give me an example.
Okay, imagine you just bombed a presentation. You thought you could just wing it, and you completely lost the room.
Ouch. Been there.
Right. Well, a natural, everyday way to express that realization in Mandarin is Wemi Maigyo Ho Swan, which means I didn't plan carefully enough.
Meg no ho swan, that's powerful because instead of saying, oh, the client was just difficult today, or the market is acting weird, which shifts the blame to external factors.
Saying Maigyo Ho Swan is a statement of radical accountability.
It acknowledges that the variables were there to be calculated and you simply failed to do the math.
Exactly. And you can also use it proactively, to stop a disaster before it happens.
Like if your team is rushing headlong into a new project without mapping the risks.
Yeah. You can say, Zijin Shi Yao Yu Ho Suan Yi Swan. We need to really think this through.
By saying we need to suani suan, you aren't just casually suggesting a brainstorming session. You're demanding that everyone bring their variables to the table before a single dollar is spent or a single line of code is written.
Bring out the counting rods.
Bring out the counting rods. And what's truly profound about this framework is that it's a universal human truth about navigating uncertainty.
It really is.
Because if we look across history, entirely different civilizations arrived at this exact same mechanism for success completely independently.
Yeah, right around the same era, roughly 500 BCE, while Sun Tzu was writing about Du Xuan in China, you had the Stoic philosophers in Greece and Rome developing a practice they called premeditatio malorum.
The premeditation of evils, the Stoic practice of intentionally visualizing the worst-case scenarios.
Exactly. Philosophers like Seneca didn't just worry about the future. They systematically dismantled fear by defining it.
They visualized losing their wealth, facing exile, or suffering public humiliation. And they mapped out their emotional and practical responses to those exact scenarios.
It was essentially an emotional swan show.
That's a great way to put it. Sun Tzu's physical counting rods and the Stoics' mental premeditation are basically identical technologies.
They're both frameworks designed to map the unknown so thoroughly that it loses its power to paralyze you. Preparation is the universal antidote to chaos.
So, think about a recent moment in your life where you decided to just wing it. Maybe it was a tense negotiation, a difficult conversation with a partner, or a major pitch.
And you relied on your charm and your ability to think on your feet.
Then it completely blew up. Well, you now have a sophisticated historical framework to understand precisely what went wrong. You didn't do enough swan. You didn't lay down the counting rods.
And you have the vocabulary to admit defeat gracefully. Weiyang yu hiao swan. I didn't plan carefully enough.
Because taking ownership of that lack of calculation is really the only way to ensure you never walk into a room unarmed again.
We've traced this concept from the wooden counting rods of ancient Chinese battlefields to the high-stakes boardrooms of venture capital, all the way to the invisible algorithms dictating our digital culture today.
And the connective tissue through all of human achievement is that du suan sheng, shino suan bu sheng.
More calculation wins. Less calculation does not win.
But this actually brings us to a massive, looming question about the future.
Uh-oh. What is it?
Well, if Sun Tzu's counting rods were the ancient spreadsheet, and today we have artificial intelligence that can map billions of variables in fractions of a second, what happens when perfect calculation becomes a cheap commodity?
Oh, wow. Yeah, when an algorithm can instantly run a million Swan Chu simulations for any business strategy or life decision, Du Xuan will no longer be the rare trait of the elite.
Everyone will have access to flawless planning.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to mull over.
If the machines are doing all of our exhaustive planning, what becomes the new human differentiator? When perfect strategy is basically guaranteed by a computer, we might just have to discover an entirely new way to win.
That's a wild thing to think about.
It really is. But until then, before you make your next big career move or before you launch that product, ask yourself, have I done enough Suan?
Hope you loved today's 8-minute upgrade. Don't forget to subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time.